Right. So we started here, and you're not hearing me very well. Let me try and see if I could switch my. Is that better? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So it's just heavy. All right. So we started and we were doing the questions on the 3C, which is case tools, advantage and disadvantage of the case tools, and we did 3A, which was on evolutionary development. Okay, we're going into questions 4, the questions that are not the diagram questions, right? And we can, well, we started to talk about it, but let's write it down. So what are functional requirements? Last class, we started on 4E, right? 1. What did we say functional requirements are? Is everyone?
Functions or features that are required for the user.
Right. Yes. Okay, so functional requirements are the features. Oops, sorry. Features of the software that fulfill the rules and requirements, the business rules and requirements provided by the user. Okay, so our functional requirements really and truly are the core of the system, right? The functional requirements are the core of the system. I keep on saying that functional requirements are not less important, right, than the are not less important than the non-functional requirements, but functional requirements are basically what allows the users to complete the task or the goals of the system, right? And maybe I could include this here, right? These allow, hold on, let me silence my phone so every time you all message me, you all are gonna chime, right? These allow the user to achieve the task or goals of the system. Okay? So the next question is discuss how functional requirements are obtained during the analysis of a software system. So at the end of the last class, we identified that the functional requirements are obtained how? Right? Yes, Alexa, correct. Right? Via data collection methods such as conducting interviews, observing the current system in action, and right, conducting surveys, right? So that from users and clients of the system. Okay, yeah, so those questionnaires are important, interviews, etc. Right. So, and then we have question C. So we have 4C. And we have a one-dimensional array. And that one-dimensional array consists of 20 integers. The integers are not sorted. Consider C programming code that is written to accept an integer target from the user and determine if target is present in num. If target is found in num, the location in which it is found is printed. If target is not present in num, an appropriate error message is printed. Briefly describe 3 tests which can be used to determine if the code is working correctly. So what can we do, right, to test to see if this code, if this function is working correctly or not? So 3 things that you would do. Okay, yeah, so, well, when you say test data, what do you mean by just simply saying test data?
Like just entering random values and seeing how the code reacts. Like if it was not a letter, what would happen?
Right. So that could be 2 tests, right? So you could do it, you could, and I would say, Alexa, to do it both ways. You could enter code that you know will give a specific answer and see what it does. Then you could enter code that you don't know or are you not sure about what the answer will be and test it in that manner. And then you can enter incorrect data, right? So I would say to do like 3 tests. Test one would be to enter array values and a search key that you know exists in the array, right? So enter array values and a search key that you know exists in the array, right? And then you test 2, enter array values and a search key that does not exist in the array. And then the 3rd test might be to enter either a string array or a string array with a number or a single character with a numeric array and see how, Alexa, I would like to, I could start the channel, I could download the video and before this one and this video, and I would start putting it on a YouTube playlist. So what I would do is I would just send you one playlist address. Once you have that playlist address, I'll continue adding the videos to that playlist. Okay? All right. All right. So enter a string with a number, a single character with a numeric array, and see how the function, and see what the function returns, right? Because if your code is working properly, right? If your code is working properly, then it should actually protect against such things. Okay. Tarek, if it is that I do get a sponsor, I'm going to hope that it is Raid Shadow Legends, because the game is one of the most complete RPG games that you could play on your mobile. Right? I have actually never played the game, but the ads are so amazing that I actually have, when I get a Raid Shadow Legends ad, is one of those ads that I don't get vexed that I'm seeing, because they actually have pretty entertaining ads. All right. My second choice would probably be Skillshare. Collins, if you want to learn how to hold a gun to someone's head properly, you could probably find out how to do that on Skillshare. Right. All right. What was wrong with Skillshare, Alexa? All right. So I'm going to add a page to yeah, they all over the place. I actually kind of wonder what's their like sponsorship budget. Okay. All right. So we want to do this question here, 3b, which is a data flow diagram. So we have, in a typical visit to a doctor, you're seeing the question clearly, right? You all could read it or zoom in some more. All right, Shavish, like, I'm not even bothering to edit. I'm just going to post the I post the videos unlisted. So only if you have the playlist address, you can see it. So don't go sharing up my playlist, right? And let me say the gun comment. The gun comment was in response to Collins's statement, right? Anybody watching this in the future and wondering, well, why is Sir talking about a gun to somebody's head? Right? I'm going to screenshot Collins's comment into my presentation right there, so everybody can see it. Okay, good. All right. Oh, you all could do your own Zoom. Okay, so all right. So in a typical visitor doctor, when the doctor consults with the patient tells the doctor the symptoms of his or her problem. Right? The doctor uses his or her medical knowledge and experience together with any historical information available on the patient from a patient file and makes a diagnosis. The diagnosis is reported to the patient and recorded in the patient file. Based on the diagnosis, the doctor prescribes a course of medication for the patient. In order to bill the patient, the doctor submits the list of tests and services performed to the accounting section. The prices for the tests and services are obtained from the accounting file, and the cost of the visit is calculated and recorded in the file. A bill is then given to the patient. So we want to be able to create a level 0 data flow diagram. This is 14 marks, right? This is not just the big circle, the context level diagram. This is the first level data flow diagram. Okay? So we want to first try and identify any external entities. How does our system work? And this is sometimes why a context diagram is important. So let's do a quick sketch of a context diagram now, just to get things going, in terms of being able to think of our solution, right? So if we have the system here, and we have the, what is the name of the system, right? The name of the system is the, what could we call the system? Medical system or something, so doctor's office system, all right? We don't really have to show the context diagram, so we could just call it the doctor's office system, right? So this is our entire system. What data is coming in and out of the system, not just the processes that make up the system, but the entire system itself. Who is outside of the system, right? The patient is outside of the system, and the patient tells the doctor his or her symptoms. So the patient, all right, so we have a patient, and I know that we're not supposed to create this, but this helps, right? Because that's why we say it's a context level system. So P, right, so we have the patient, and what does the patient put into the system? The patient will put into the system, right? They will tell the doctor their symptoms. So symptoms is an input to the system. Okay, symptoms is an input to the system. What else does the patient, the patient tell the doctor? Well, nothing at this point. The doctor uses their medical knowledge along with any historical information. So historical information is something saved from a patient file, right? And the diagnosis is reported to the patient. So that comes out of the system to the patient, a diagnosis. Okay, and recorded also in the patient file. Based on the diagnosis, the doctor prescribes a course of medication for the patient. So this is also something that comes out of because the patient receives that. In order to bill the patient, the doctor submits the list of tests and services performed to the accounting section. Okay, are we assuming that the accounting is a process inside of the system? Yes, it is. The price for tests and services are obtained, and the accounting file and the cost of the visit is calculated and recorded in the file. So then the patient also gets a bill. So we have one thing inside of our, based on the data that was given to us. This system produces three things: the diagnosis, the course of medication, and the bill. And the patient should only put in one thing, which is their symptoms to the doctor. All right. So let's think on this. Give me a minute and I will be back, please. Just 1 minute. Right, so we want to be able to create the actual data flow diagram now. So we have an idea of what goes in and what happens when, right? And a system overview, and this is what our DFD should also look like in terms of inputs and outputs. So again, we start with the patient as an external entity. Okay, we start with the patient as an external entity. And the first process is what? Right? So what is the first process that the patient does? When you are with the doctor, you're basically consulting the doctor. Right? So the first process, how is everyone so quiet? Or why is everyone so quiet?
I was just watching a video. Sorry.
Sorry?
That was a joke. But I'm listening.
All right. Yes. Okay, Alexa is thinking deeply. Right? Everybody else just stays quiet when I ask why is everyone so quiet. Okay. So we have the consultation process, and this is where the patient tells the doctors their symptoms. What goes on inside of this consultation process? We say the doctor uses his or her medical knowledge and experience together with any historical information available on the patient from a patient file and makes a diagnosis. So in the consultation, we have to access information from the patient file, right? So we could get the patient history here. All right, we can get the patient history here. And also, so this is a request for the patient history. Right? And a diagnosis is made, and the diagnosis is reported to the patient and recorded in the patient file. So we're also going to have to update the patient file with a diagnosis update. So we have the patient history request and the diagnosis update. And from the consultation process, we also have the diagnosis going back to the patient. And so what's the next thing? Right? The diagnosis is reported to the patient and recorded in the patient file. Based on the diagnosis, the doctor prescribes a course of medication for the patient. Okay, so the next step here is to do the prescription. Okay, so the diagnosis also goes down to the prescription process. So this is the second thing that we have here, and this is the prescription process. And what do we say happens in the prescription process? Based on the diagnosis, the doctor prescribes a course of medication for the patient. In order to bill the patient, the doctor submits a list of tests and services performed to the accounting section. So the prescription process, right? Oops, I did not put the name of this patient file here. All right, and of course, you have to label it. Okay, so to the patient, and just to prevent crossing over and stuff like that, I'm going to make over a new there. And so the prescription process sends, of course, the course of medication to the patient. All right. And then the last thing that we do, that we have, is that we have the billing, right? So it said here, in order to bill the patient, the doctor submits the list of tests and services performed to the accounting section. The prices for the tests and services are obtained from an accounting file, and the cost of the visit is calculated and recorded in the file. A bill is then given to the patient. So we have a third process, which is, we could name this the accounting process. All right, so this third process here is the accounting process. Or billing process. And what do we want to do in the billing process, right? The information from the consultation that is passed here is tests and services. So we have some tests and services performed inside of here, and that is sent to the billing process. We see that in the billing process, right, those tests and services performed, right, are checked against an accounting file, and the cost of the visit is calculated and recorded in the file. So we have our accounting file here. All right, so this is D2, and this is accounting file. And what do we do with the accounting file? In the accounting file, we will right, we do this. We request prices of services, right? We will send the prices of services. And of course, afterwards, we have to put in what was calculated. So we update patient cost, right? We update the patient cost, and then we have to, based upon what is calculated inside of there, we will send a bill to the patient. Okay, so we record, update patient cost inside of the accounting file, and then finally, we will send a bill for services to the patient. So let's check and see if this DFD is the same as this here, right? We had the patient putting in the symptoms. That's something coming from here. We have the diagnosis coming out. That's coming out of the consultation process, right? Once the diagnosis is made, we have the prescription process, and the prescription process, of course, takes in the diagnosis and puts out the course of medication that the patient should take, right? That's coming out of here, course of medication. We have the consultation process, feeding in the tests and services performed with the billing process, right? With the billing process, and you have, of course, the bill for services, which is the bill coming out of here. One thing that you could assume is that, of course, if the hospital itself is providing the medication, it could also send across to the accounting process, right? The medicines prescribed. Okay, so we could send across the medicines prescribed to for the billing process if you make the assumption that the billing process also encompasses the medications that were there. Anybody have any issues with this?
Yeah, I thought you couldn't have two and of the same entity.
You couldn't have two of the same entity.
Yeah, you have patient on top and patient on.
No, this is just a duplicate here because I didn't want to draw the line all the way across there. We could do this in this diagram because it's the same patient. Right? But if that makes you uncomfortable, we could remove it and draw the line. Right? So if it's not
That's fine.
Right? And that there is about the same thing. Okay. Anything else? Anybody have any questions?
No, sir.
All right. Amaya and Asha, I ain't heard your voices in a while. How are you all doing?
I'm fine.
Okay. Amaya? Shavish, your mic working? All right. Jeremy, you seeing anything or no? All right. Feel like Jeremy went to wash that plate and never came back. Hey, Jeremy here. Yes, yeah, you responded in the chat. Look at that. All right. Okay. So I know that, of course, DFDs take a lot more work than ERDs. And to me, ERD questions are always a kind of like a giveaway of marks, right? ERD questions are always like a giveaway of marks. So, because ERDs are much more simpler to do than DFDs, especially the way that Keep asked them, right? This is a little complex. This requires some thought, and what it requires is for us not to have, right? What it requires is for us not to have any line missing a label or anything like that. Okay, so the more processes and the more data that is moving around in your system is the easier it is to forget something. Have any little issues or anything. So, but your entity relationship diagrams are often much simpler to produce. So we say a certain private hospital has a number of wards. Several doctors are hired by the hospital to treat patients who seek medical services. A patient may be seen by one or more doctors but is assigned to one ward. When a patient is assigned to a ward, the patient is prescribed one or more drugs for a certain period. The patient's first name, last name, and address are recorded, and a patient ID is used to uniquely identify each patient at the hospital. So we want to draw an entity relationship diagram for the scenario. The first thing to do is that we need to identify what are our entities. So, entities. This is where, all right, Alexa is saying doctors, patients, drugs, ward. Okay, so we identify here that the hospital has wards. We only have one hospital. So we can't really consider the hospital an entity. A hospital is the organization that is keeping track of its entities. Several doctors are hired by the hospital. All right. Thank you, Shavish, for that information that is not really relevant. Treat patients who seek medical service. So we have patients. We have patients, and the patient might be seen by one or more doctor, but is assigned to one ward. Hold on. Right. When a patient is assigned to a ward, the patient is prescribed one or more drugs for a certain period. Right? The patient's first name, last name, address. So those things are entities of attributes about the entity patient. So we have drugs, right? And what tells us that the drug is an entity is that there's a relationship expressed here, one or more drugs for the certain period. So the patient's first name, last name, address are recorded, and the patient ID is used to uniquely identify each patient in the hospital. So they gave us these things. Maybe I could change the color here to orange. These things here in orange are attributes that we need to express on the document because they were given to us. So now we can start to draw information, right? And we start off with, of course, we could start off with the ward, right? We have doctors. All right, doctor, right? We have patients. And we have drugs. And now we want to start showing how these things relate to each other, right? So a ward can contain many patients, but a patient will stay on one ward, right? So a ward could have 0 or more patients, and a patient stays on one and only one ward, right? So a ward contains patients, right? A doctor, right, can treat zero or more patients, and a patient is treated by one or more doctors, right? So a doctor treats the patient, okay? A ward can contain one or more doctors, and a doctor can work on one or more wards, right? So we have to put the contain here, contains, right? Or I don't like to use the same word twice. Some database people look down on that. So let's not use contains again, right? But we can say has or something, so. All right. And of course, a patient, they said here, a patient may be prescribed one or more drugs. So a patient doesn't have to be given any more, given any drugs, eh? So a patient could actually have 0 or more drugs, right? And a drug, or actually no, they said that once the patient in a ward, the patient is prescribed one or more drugs for a period. So, right, according to what they say, we have one or more drugs, and a drug can be given to, right, a drug could be given to 0 or more patients. So a patient is prescribed one or more drugs. And now we have to put in the patient's information, first name, last name, address, and ID, right? So each patient will have an ID, and that ID is the identifying variable, sorry, the identifying attribute. So we underline that, right? And then we have their first name, last name, and address. So we put F name, L name, and address. Okay, and this is, of course, our entity relationship diagram. This is our entity relationship diagram for this question. Anybody have any issues with that?
No, sir.
All right.
No, sir.
So it is 9:54 a.m. I'm going to give a 10-minute break. Yes, Collins, we did this already. All right. I'm going to give a 10-minute break, so we will resume at 10:05 a.m. Any questions before I go? No?
No, sir.
All right. All right. So I will see you all shortly. Also, did anybody notice the subtle interface change on the Teams app or no?
Yes, because Teams told me they was updating the thing.
Ah, okay. I don't know. I kind of like the previous look, but you know,
They make
I
the
guess.
icons more round.
Yeah. Rather than square, but I prefer the square icons. Anyway, enjoy your break.